As you close your eyes, imagine the mighty city of Constantinople, crossroads of empires and centuries, standing proud against the edge of the world. Its golden domes gleam in the last rays of a fading age, while ancient walls guard secrets and dreams. In each which are sad. This city, the last stronghold of Byzantium, faces its final test. Outside, the Ottoman armies gather, their banners rising beneath the dawn. Inside, hope, fear, faith, and sorrow mingle in every heart. Before the storm breaks, let us journey together into those fateful days, the twilight of a legendary city and the dawn of a new world. The sun dipped low behind the great dome of Hagia Sophia, casting long shadows over the ancient streets of Constantinople. The city that had stood as the jewel of Christendom now trembled beneath the weight of fate. On the ramparts, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos surveyed the horizon, his face marked by years of struggle. His imperial robes fluttered in the cool evening breeze. Purple dye faded, but dignity unbroken. All around him, the city's people moved with a nervous energy. Merchants packing up market stalls, soldiers tightening belts, mothers drawing children indoors. The air was thick with fear and hope intermingled. At the city's heart, bells chimed for evening prayer, their sound drifting across tile rooftops and echoing against the mighty Theodosian Walls. In the palace, advisors gathered by candlelight, whispering news of the Ottoman camp growing on the far shore. In quiet corners, priests knelt and prayed for deliverance. Yet, even as darkness gathered, the city shone, lanterns lighting alleys, families sharing bread, laughter defying despair. For tonight, at least, Constantinople endured. The last rays of sunlight bathed the city's ancient stones in gold, painting a memory of glory that no army could erase. Inside the Byzantine palace, shadows flickered as counselors gathered around Emperor Constantine. The faces in the candlelight were etched with exhaustion, noblemen in rich silks, foreign mercenaries in battered armor, priests in black robes, and the emperor himself at the table's head. John Giustiniani Longo, the famed Genoese commander, stood tall and resolute, his chainmail gleaming. Arguments flared. Some demanded surrender, others urged a last desperate stand. The emperor listened, his expression grave. "We defend not only this city, but all Christendom," he declared, voice steady. The council fell silent. Maps were spread, strategies debated. Outside, the drums of the Ottoman army could be heard, faint but constant. As the meeting ended, Constantine dismissed his men with the solemn blessing. Each left the hall with new burdens, the weight of the empire pressing on every shoulder. The city's market square, once lively, now bustled with anxious urgency. Stalls displayed sparse bread, salted fish, olives, and a few shriveled apples. Supply lines had been cut for months. Vendors called out final sales as buyers bartered with coins and trinkets. A mother clutched her daughter's hand tightly, buying what little they could. Overhead, the city banners rippled in the dusk wind. Nearby, soldiers kept watch, their presence a silent reminder of war. Some merchants offered prayers with each sale. Others eyed the horizon, fearing it might be their last market day. Despite the tension, a musician strummed a soft melody, drawing a brief smile from a passing child. Above, the first stars began to appear, unnoticed by those struggling for tomorrow. On the city's towering walls, vigilant eyes watched the darkness beyond. In the distance, thousands of campfires dotted the land where Mehmed II's army encamped. The faint sound of drums and shouting carried across the fields. A young sentry squinted, counting banners and tents, his breath steaming in the chill air. Veteran soldiers pointed out enemy siege towers under construction, their silhouettes monstrous against the firelight. Behind them, a priest walked the rampart, offering blessings and calming fears. A signal torch was lit, alerting other towers. The defenders tightened their grips on spears and crossbows, nerves fraying with every hour. The city's fate, they knew, would be decided by those who watched longest through the night. Across the plain, in a lavish tent surrounded by guards and advisors, Sultan Mehmed II stood over a map of Constantinople. Only 21, he carried the bearing of a conqueror: sharp eyes, youthful beard, ornate silk robes, and jeweled turban. Beside him, Ottoman engineer demonstrated a miniature of a great cannon. Janissary captains awaited orders, silent but eager. Mehmed's finger traced the Theodosian Walls as he spoke of destiny. The world will remember who rules this city. He ordered the great cannons drawn forward. At dawn, the Ottoman camp hummed with preparation. Soldiers prayed, horses watered, blacksmiths hammered swords and pikes. Mehmed retired to his tent, gaze lingering on the city, certain that history was within his grasp. The great cathedral of Hagia Sophia glowed with hundreds of candles, their light dancing over ancient mosaics. Hundreds of citizens, nobles, beggars, soldiers, merchants, gathered for prayer. The patriarch in resplendent robes led chants, incense swirling in the vaulted air. Men and women wept openly, begging for deliverance. Children clung to parents' robes, eyes wide with confusion and dread. Soldiers knelt in full armor, seeking strength from the divine. The prayers of a city under siege rose into the night, echoing through the marble halls. Some clung to faith, others to ritual, but all found comfort beneath the vast dome. Outside, the night pressed close, and the fate of an empire rested in hands both earthly and divine. In a narrow alley near the city walls, children played at siege. Boys with wooden swords pretended to be soldiers, shouting challenges and scaling imaginary walls. A girl playing the emperor wore a purple scarf as a crown. The laughter was nervous, echoing, then silenced as a distant boom sounded from the enemy camp. A mother called her children inside, face pale. The children hesitated, looking at the sky, sensing the fear beneath the game. The world around them was changing. Innocence gave way to the reality of war. Yet for a moment longer they ran and laughed, the last echoes of peace in a city on the brink. Beneath the moon, Emperor Constantine gathered his officers atop the Theodosian Walls. The wind tugged at their cloaks as he spoke. "We stand together for our city, our faith, and our honor." Each officer placed a hand on the ancient stones, swearing loyalty. The emperor, voice steady, reminded them of their ancestors' courage. Giustiniani led the soldiers in a cheer, voices ringing out into the night. For a brief moment, fear turned to resolve. Torches burned along the ramparts, illuminating faces etched with determination. The emperor's speech became legend, a rallying cry as the city braced for the storm to come. Night deepened. In darkened homes across the city, families knelt in silence. Fathers led prayers at candlelit tables. Children bowed their heads. Mothers clutched icons to their chests. Outside, the muffled sounds of Ottoman preparations carried on the wind. Hope and fear mingled in every whispered word. Some prayed for a miracle, others for a swift end. In the poorest quarters, neighbors gathered, sharing bread and hope. In noble houses, mothers sent final letters to relatives abroad. Through it all, the city's heart beat on, a chorus of whispered prayers rising, unnoticed, into the watchful night. Deep in the palace, Constantine XI kept vigil alone in the imperial chapel. Before a golden icon of Christ, he knelt, whispering for courage. The chapel glowed with lamp oil and candlelight, mosaics glittering in the dark. The emperor set aside his crown, hands clasped in prayer, seeking wisdom and peace for his people. Outside, the palace guard changed shift, silent and grim. The city beyond the windows was shrouded in uneasy sleep, but the emperor remained awake, holding Constantinople in his prayers. In that quiet midnight hour, he was not a ruler, but a servant, his spirit woven into the fate of the city he loved. Before the morning, sun burned away the mists. Sultan Mehmed II convened his most trusted advisors in his elaborate field pavilion. The tent's walls were draped with silk banners bearing the crescent moon. At the center, Mehmed stood by a massive campaign table, its surface crowded with maps and siege plans. Viziers in flowing robes and janissary officers in gleaming armor listened intently as the Sultan spoke. "This city shall be the jewel of my reign. We will spare no effort, no resource." Orban, the Hungarian engineer, a large man with coal-dusted hands, stepped forward to describe the placement of the mighty cannons. The room crackled with tension. This was not merely a battle, but an audacious gamble to change history. Mehmed ordered scouts to report enemy strengths and engineers to hasten the artillery works. When the meeting ended, his commanders bowed deeply, then hurried to obey his every word. Mehmed lingered, his gaze fixed on the direction of the distant walls, already seeing himself triumphant. The Ottoman foundry bustled with relentless energy. At its heart, Orban supervised the casting of the largest cannons the world had ever seen. Flames roared in the massive furnace. Men heaved buckets of molten bronze, and the clangor of hammers echoed across the plain. The heat was suffocating, sweat pouring from every laborer. The cannon molds, huge and cylindrical, stood ready. Orban barked orders, wiping grime from his brow, as apprentices scrambled to maintain the flow. The Sultan himself visited, nodding approval at the progress. Once the bronze was poured, men worked through the night, quenching the molds and sharpening tools. When dawn came, the immense barrels were revealed, monstrous, iron-bound tubes destined to smash the ancient walls. Ottoman soldiers cheered, sensing that these machines would decide the fate of empires. Beyond the artillery works, thousands of janissaries drilled in perfect lines beneath the Turkish flags. Their white turbans gleamed in the morning sun, uniforms crisp and faces stern with discipline. Drums and flutes set a relentless rhythm as captains barked orders. Swords flashed and spears struck in synchronized movement. Veteran soldiers demonstrated tactics for the new recruits, how to form shield walls, advance under arrow fire, and storm breaches. Some janissaries, younger boys conscripted from the Balkans, looked both eager and anxious. Overseeing all, the aga of the janissaries paced up and down, his eyes missing nothing. The soldiers' resolve was unwavering. They believed themselves unstoppable, the elite core of the Sultan's dream. The Ottomans constructed enormous siege towers near the front lines. Engineers pored over blueprints as carpenters hammered wooden frames together. The towers rose, story by story, huge wheels and iron plates added for mobility and protection. Soldiers heaved ropes and pulleys, fitting drawbridges and shields to the upper levels. Instructors demonstrated how troops would climb the towers to attack the walls. Children from nearby villages, pressed into labor, carried buckets and beams. All work was under the wary eyes of Turkish overseers, who made sure the project never slowed. The towers became symbols of terror for the Byzantines, who could see them growing each day, tall and ominous against the skyline. In the surrounding countryside, Ottoman cavalry units scouted for supply lines, rebel outposts, and possible ambushes. Mounted on powerful Anatolian horses, the cavalry wore ornate lamellar armor and curved scimitars at their hips. Their banners, bright with the crescent moon, snapped in the wind. Commanders scanned the landscape for movement, sending scouts through fields and along riverbanks. At a farmhouse, a patrol interrogated local peasants, seeking information, taking supplies, but also offering silver in exchange for loyalty. Some villages submitted, some hid in terror. At sunset, the horsemen returned to camp with maps, prisoners, and tales of Byzantine spies. Their discipline and speed made them the Sultan's eyes and ears, ensuring no help could reach the besieged city. As night fell, the Ottoman engineers labored by torchlight, assembling siege weapons in secrecy. The air hummed with the sounds of saws and hammers as they finished massive trebuchets and wheeled catapults. Orban himself supervised the assembly, carefully checking each mechanism. Teams tested weights and counterbalances, their shadows dancing on the canvas walls. Guards stood watch, alert for spies or sabotage. The work was exhausting, but the knowledge that their inventions might breach the invincible walls spurred the men on. Overhead, stars glimmered, unnoticed by the men toiling for glory or survival. The Ottomans unleashed a campaign of psychological warfare against Constantinople. At dawn, Turkish soldiers marched in great parades near the walls, drummers and horn players creating a deafening roar. War banners waved, and the army's sheer size was displayed for the defenders to see. Messengers delivered written threats, promising mercy for surrender, destruction for resistance, catapulted over the walls on arrows or tied to rocks. Byzantine lookouts watched with dread as Ottoman mullahs led prayers and sacrifices. Visible from the ramparts, the emperor's spies reported unrest among the city's poor. Fearful of what awaited them, every effort was made to demoralize the defenders and break their will before the cannons even fired. In the final hours before the assault, Mehmed II walked the lines in disguise, speaking quietly with his soldiers. He promised rewards, pardons, and eternal glory for the faithful. Fires burned in the Ottoman camp, illuminating faces, some confident, others nervous. Orban made last checks of the great cannon, lubricating wheels, testing the fuse. Sappers whispered about tunnels they dug beneath the walls. Some janissaries sharpened swords, others prayed. In the command tent, maps were laid out, final orders given. As midnight passed, the camp quieted, every man knowing the dawn would bring blood and history. As dawn broke, the Ottoman army drew up their artillery. Dozens of cannons, large and small, were arranged in lines facing the Theodosian Walls. Orban directed teams of oxen to move the largest piece, basilica, into position. Gunners checked powder, loaded shot, and adjusted angles. The air was heavy with anticipation and the acrid scent of gunpowder. Mehmed rode along the lines, speaking encouragement, while commanders signaled their readiness. Soldiers stood back, covering their ears. With a thunderous boom, the first cannon fired, shaking earth and sky. A new era in siege warfare had begun, and the defenders on the walls recoiled in horror at the sight and sound. The first cannonballs struck the Theodosian Walls with a thunder that shook the city to its core. Stone blocks splintered, dust clouds rising as defenders rushed to their posts. Panic and awe mingled among the Byzantines. Many had never seen artillery of such scale. On the ramparts, Constantine XI steadied his men, calling orders as debris rained down. Some soldiers fell, wounded by flying stones. Priests moved among the defenders, blessing the terrified and tending the wounded. As the barrage continued, the city's ancient walls, unbreached for centuries, began to show cracks. Both armies realized the truth. Constantinople had entered a new and terrible phase of war. The sun rose over Constantinople to reveal devastation along the mighty Theodosian Walls. Jagged stones and shattered battlements lay scattered where cannonballs had landed. Dust and smoke hung in the morning air. Byzantine soldiers, bleary-eyed but determined, toiled to repair breaches with whatever materials they could find: timbers, rubble, and sandbags. Emperor Constantine XI strode among his men, offering praise and solace, his own tunic torn and stained by dust. General Giustiniani directed teams to reinforce weak points, barking orders in Italian, Greek, and Latin. Children peered from behind broken parapets, wide-eyed, as their fathers worked. Priests moved among the wounded, blessing the living, giving last rites to the dead. Despite exhaustion, a spirit of grim resolve clung to the defenders. The city would not fall easily. In the Ottoman camp, a sense of excitement and anticipation swept through the ranks. Janissaries and Azaps, light infantry, assembled in orderly formations, shields gleaming, scimitars and spears in hand. Drummers pounded a relentless rhythm, while trumpeters sounded a call to arms. Mehmed II rode down the line on a white stallion, offering words of encouragement, his eyes fierce and confident. Officers relayed the Sultan's final orders. Today, they would test the defenders' strength. Archers strung bows, artillerymen loaded fresh powder, and engineers made last-minute checks to siege towers and ladders. With the first blast of the horn, the Ottoman vanguard surged forward, eager to storm the city that had defied empires for centuries. With a thunderous roar, the first Ottoman assault crashed against the outer walls. Azaps ran forward with shields raised, arrows raining down from the Byzantine defenders above. Siege ladders were planted against the stone, and the Ottomans began to climb. On the ramparts, Giustiniani's men poured boiling oil and hurled stones, pushing ladders back with poles. Arrows flew in both directions, finding their mark on flesh and armor. The defenders fought with desperate courage, hacking at the hands and heads of those who breached the parapets. Cries of pain and battle echoed through the morning air. After an hour of fierce combat, the first wave faltered, many falling back in chaos, others lying still. The defenders exhaled in relief, but they knew this was only the beginning. As the first wave withdrew, the Janissaries, elite Ottoman shock troops, marched forward in unison. Their discipline was terrifying, shields interlocked, spears bristling, their white turbans forming a river of color. Trumpets blared, drums thundered, and the Janissaries surged up the breached section of the wall. Byzantine archers loosed arrows, but many were deflected by shields or armor. The Janissaries, undaunted, threw grappling hooks, scaling the wall with astonishing speed. A brutal melee erupted atop the ramparts. Steel clashed, blood sprayed. Cries of defiance and agony filled the air. Emperor Constantine XI, hearing the battle's intensity, joined his men in defense, his sword flashing as he rallied the desperate. Inch by inch, the defenders held, at enormous cost. In a daring move, Byzantine engineers deployed a precious store of Greek fire, a terrifying liquid weapon known for its inextinguishable flames. As Janissaries crowded atop a breach, defenders pumped the mixture from brass tubes, jets of fire shooting into the ranks of the attackers. Flames clung to flesh and armor, causing panic and terror in the Ottoman ranks. The air filled with screams and acrid smoke. Some Janissaries threw themselves from the wall to escape. Others tried desperately to smother the fire. The defenders seized the moment to push back, hurling burning brands and boiling oil. The assault faltered as the Ottomans fell back, shaken and scorched. For a moment, the defenders tasted hope. The ancient secret weapon had worked, if only briefly. Angered by the defenders' resilience, Mehmed II ordered the cannons to open fire once again. The ground shook as the great basilica and her sisters belched smoke and fire. Massive stone balls hurtled toward the walls, smashing new breaches and sending masonry flying. Defenders cowered behind what cover they could find, praying the ancient stones would hold. Dust and debris rained down on both sides. Some sections of the wall wavered, others collapsed entirely, sending soldiers tumbling. Constantine XI hurried from breach to breach, encouraging the men and overseeing quick repairs. The relentless barrage frayed nerves but also forged a sense of shared desperation. Among the defenders, they would hold as long as they could. When darkness fell, the Ottomans attempted a new tactic. Night assaults meant to catch the weary defenders off guard. Small teams of Azaps and sappers crept toward the walls, carrying ladders and explosive charges. Under cover of darkness, they set fire to wooden barricades and attempted to undermine the foundations with picks and powder. Byzantine sentries spotted some of the intruders, sounding the alarm. A brutal skirmish erupted in the torchlit night. Arrows flew, swords flashed, and defenders hurled rocks and burning pitch. Some sappers were caught and killed, others managed to plant explosives, sending part of the wall crumbling. By dawn, the attackers had withdrawn, but the defenders were left with new wounds and new holes to repair. Within the walls, the city's daily life became a struggle for survival. Food grew scarce, and ration lines snaked through the streets. Bakers and butchers distributed whatever supplies remained under the watchful eye of soldiers. Children searched for scraps while mothers tried to comfort them. In workshops, blacksmiths hammered broken swords and armor back into shape. The city's churches overflowed with the faithful seeking solace. Emperor Constantine visited hospitals, comforting the wounded and assuring the frightened that help would come. Hope, hunger, and fear mixed in equal measure. Yet at every corner, the city's spirit endured, prayers, songs, and stories echoing beneath the shadow of war. A sudden flurry of excitement gripped the harbor as 3 Genoese ships, braving the Ottoman blockade, managed to slip into the Golden Horn. The exhausted sailors brought precious supplies, grain, oil, arrows, and news from the west. Crowds gathered on the docks, cheering as the ships unloaded their cargo. Constantine XI met the captains, offering thanks and hope. Venetian and Genoese soldiers in the city welcomed their countrymen, exchanging information and promises of support. Though the supplies would not last forever, their arrival lifted spirits, a reminder that the world beyond had not completely abandoned Constantinople. Across the water, Ottoman galleys maneuvered in response, setting the stage for a coming naval battle. As the day ended, the true cost of survival became clear. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded, families mourned those lost in the latest assaults. Priests offered last rites to fallen soldiers, while grave diggers worked by lantern light. In the emperor's quarters, Constantine XI met with his most trusted advisors, Giustiniani, the Venetian and Genoese captains, and senior clergy. Each reported the city's dwindling supplies, the mounting casualties, and the wavering morale. Still, Constantine would not yield. "We fight for our faith, our families, and our history," he declared. That night, the defenders prepared for another day, knowing each dawn could be their last, but refusing to surrender hope. Inside the besieged city, hunger gnawed at every citizen. The food stores, once overflowing, now held only meager scraps. By sunrise, a line of weary citizens had already formed outside the city's main bakery. Soldiers tried to maintain order as families, clutching empty baskets, waited with a desperation that deepened each day. Children cried for bread, mothers offered prayers, and old men recalled the city's past feasts. The baker, flour dust clinging to his hair and beard, measured out rations with a heavy heart, dividing stale loaves and moldy cheese. In the growing crowd, tempers sometimes flared, but most accepted their share with stoic resignation. When the last crust was given, the baker bowed his head, and the line dispersed, each family left to face another day of want. Every church and monastery had become a hospital. On straw pallets, the wounded groaned, some missing limbs, others blinded or burned by fire and shrapnel. Nurses and priests moved from bed to bed, offering water, cleaning wounds, murmuring prayers. One priest, his hands trembling, gently pressed a cross to each forehead, seeking miracles where medicine fell short. In a corner, a surgeon stitched a soldier's gash, while a choir of nuns sang hymns to soothe the suffering. Emperor Constantine XI made an unannounced visit, pausing by each pallet, clasping hands, promising aid. The smell of blood and incense mixed in the air. For many, these acts of compassion became the only light in the city's darkest hours. In the cramped cellars beneath the city's homes, families hid from the constant thunder of cannons and the threat of collapse. Mothers shushed terrified children, while fathers reinforced doors with furniture. The rooms were crowded. Relatives, neighbors, even strangers huddled together for comfort. A grandmother told stories of the city's glory days, her voice steady above the sounds of distant battle. Candles flickered, shadows danced on the rough stone walls. From time to time, dust drifted down as the ground shook. Despite fear, there was unity in these spaces. The walls of the city were mirrored by the walls of family and faith. Above, the city's defenders stood watch, eyes never leaving the enemy camps beyond the moat. Shifts rotated day and night, men fighting exhaustion as well as fear. Some cleaned the battered weapons, others checked for weak stones and cracks, patching breaches as best they could. Giustiniani strode along the ramparts, inspecting defenses and encouraging the weary. Archers practiced with the city's dwindling supply of arrows, while watchmen took careful notes of enemy movements. From above, the Ottoman banners and siege engines looked endless. Still, no one abandoned their post. These walls were all that stood between life and oblivion. For the city's children, war became a strange game. In alleys and courtyards, they acted out the siege with makeshift shields and wooden swords. Some played Ottomans with sticks and old pots, others defenders scaling barrels as if they were city walls. Their laughter was fleeting, quickly silenced when real explosions boomed in the distance. Older children watched over the younger, sometimes sneaking bread to friends whose families had less. At night, they whispered hopes and fears, clutching talismans for luck. Their innocence was battered, but not yet lost. The city's fate was their fate, woven into the games and dreams of its youngest hearts. The cathedral of Hagia Sophia, once resplendent, now echoed with prayers and laments. By day, citizens crowded beneath its soaring dome, clutching icons, lighting candles, and begging for mercy. The patriarch led processions through the nave, blessing the faithful, invoking saints and angels. Tears flowed as voices rose in ancient hymns. Some slept on the marble floor, too afraid to leave its sanctuary. The candlelight revealed faces marked by hunger, hope, and exhaustion. In the gallery above, choirs sang as clouds of incense drifted upward. The city's faith had become its final bastion, an invisible wall standing against despair. In dark workshops, the city's artisans worked day and night. Blacksmiths hammered salvaged metal into swords and arrowheads. Carpenters carved barricades and sharpened stakes. Women wove new tunics from scraps of linen, and cobblers patched old boots for soldiers. Every skill was pressed into service for survival. The air rang with the sounds of tools and the sense of sweat and hot metal. Apprentices ran messages and fetched supplies. Some artisans painted icons for the churches, hoping their work might inspire courage. In their labor, they found purpose, a way to resist the fear and helplessness that stalked the streets. Emperor Constantine XI and his war council met daily in the palace's war room. The emperor's face was drawn, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. Maps and casualty lists covered the tables. Giustiniani and the Venetian and Genoese captains argued over defense strategies and dwindling ammunition. Clergy offered counsel and recorded miracles and deaths alike. Constantine listened to all, his leadership steady even as morale wavered. He delegated tasks, assigned relief shifts, and made hard decisions about rationing. At night, he prayed alone for guidance, his heart heavy, but his resolve unbroken. The city's fate rested on his weary shoulders. Rumors crept through the city like shadows. Some whispered that Ottoman spies had bribed gatekeepers or poisoned wells. Others claimed Western fleets were on their way, or that the Sultan's own men plotted rebellion. At taverns and wells, citizens exchanged fearful gossip. The city's few remaining agents risked their lives, eavesdropping on strangers, reporting to the emperor's guards. In the palace, Constantine XI received urgent messages, ordering increased patrols and quiet investigations. Trust became scarce. Anion could be a traitor or a hero. Still, the city's defenders pressed on, guided by hope and vigilance. As night fell, the people of Constantinople looked for signs of hope. Lanterns flickered in every window, defying the darkness. Families gathered to share a final meal. Simple bread, perhaps a few olives, but always together. In quiet rooms, songs and prayers mingled, stories were told, and promises made to survive another day. From the palace to the humblest cellar, a silent vow spread. They would not yield to despair. On the walls, soldiers watched the enemy fires burn, but their hearts remained fixed on the city they loved. Through exhaustion and fear, faith and hope endured, thin but unbroken. At first light, Emperor Constantine XI summoned his council to the palace's shadowed war chamber. The mood was tense. A messenger had arrived bearing news of possible aid from the west. Around the table, the Emperor Giustiniani, the Venetian captain Gabriele Trevisano, and Patriarch Athanasius debated the letter's meaning. Was it hope or a trick? Maps lay open, wine untouched, and worry lines etched every face. The Emperor's voice was calm but strained. We cannot trust promises, but we cannot surrender hope. Giustiniani argued for renewed defenses. Trevisano insisted on rationing powder for a possible breakout, and the Patriarch led the group in prayer. As the meeting ended, the candlelight seemed dimmer. Hope had flickered, but so had doubt. Word spread quickly through the city that Western ships, Venetian or Genoese, might be sailing to their rescue. In the crowded streets, merchants and housewives debated the rumors, their voices hopeful for the first time in weeks. A group of children reenacted a sea battle with sticks, cheering as their Venetian galleys triumphed. In a corner tavern, sailors told tales of distant fleets, some swearing they saw sails on the horizon. Skeptics reminded them of broken promises and the city's long, lonely struggle. Still, the glimmer of hope was enough to spark a new determination, even if only for a day. In a quiet, candlelit room, a young Byzantine soldier, Niketas, wrote to his wife and son in trembling script. He poured out his fears and hopes, describing the thunder of cannon, the chaos on the walls, and the moments of camaraderie among his comrades. He wrote of the city's suffering, the nightly prayers in Hagia Sophia, and the promise he'd made to return. He tucked a lock of his hair and a tiny cross into the letter, hoping it might reach them if he did not survive. Tears slipped down his face as he finished, sealing the note with a prayer. Nearby, other soldiers penned their last words, each hoping for a miracle. Under a sky thick with stars, the city's defenders kept vigil on the battered ramparts. Torches flickered along the parapets, casting ghostly shadows over tired faces. Giustiniani walked the line, murmuring encouragement, checking every weak spot in the stonework. Some soldiers sang quietly to steady their nerves, while archers watched for Ottoman sappers or spies. Below, the enemy's campfires glowed like an angry constellation. For many, this silent, sleepless watch was the worst torment. Time enough to remember home, to question, to pray. A distant owl hooted, and a young sentry gripped his spear tighter, whispering a prayer for morning. Inside Hagia Sophia, the faithful gathered for an all-night vigil. The cathedral glowed with thousands of candles, the air thick with incense and chanting. Men, women, children, nobles and beggars alike, knelt together on the marble floor. The Patriarch read psalms and led the congregation in hymns, his voice echoing through the ancient dome. Some worshippers wept openly, others clasped hands in grim silence. A few priests moved through the crowd, offering comfort or hearing whispered confessions. For one night, fear was replaced by unity. The city's divisions vanished beneath the shadow of shared fate. When the doors opened at dawn, every soul inside had touched hope, however fleeting. Despair found new form in the city as disease crept through the crowded neighborhoods. In the poorest districts, fever spread quickly, leaving entire families shivering and weak. Physicians and nuns did what they could. Herbs, cool cloths, whispered prayers, but many succumbed. Rumors blamed the Ottomans for poisoning the wells, but it was hunger, filth, and exhaustion that made the city vulnerable. Priests braved the sickness to administer last rites. Constantine XI sent his own stores of wine and honey to the sick, a rare gesture of mercy. The bells of St. Thecla's tolled for the dead each night, and the city's hope was shadowed by mourning. Despite the siege, black market traders found ways to move goods. By night, a group of merchants and a daring Venetian smuggler met in a ruined stable, bartering precious grain and oil for silver, jewels, and family heirlooms. A watchful guard stood sentry outside, and the deal was made in whispers. For some, it was survival; for others, a chance at wealth. A hungry child peeked through the broken wall, eyes wide. It slipped away when the smuggler handed a crust of bread to the child. An act of mercy in a world grown hard. Not all hope was lost. Humanity flickered even in the darkest corners. In a workshop near the Blachany Gate, artisans refused to surrender. Blacksmiths forged arrowheads from scrap metal, tailors patched torn banners, and icon painters finished a new image of the Virgin for Hagia Sophia's altar. Their leader, an old smith named Alexios, roused the group with talk of the city's proud history. "Ropes to Brie, as long as we make, we fight," he declared. The youngest apprentice sang an old war song, hammering the beat on his anvil. News of these efforts spread, inspiring others. Each nail, blade, and image became a small act of hope, proof that the city's heart still beat strong. At the gate of St. Romanus, a small crowd gathered as news spread of another section of wall collapsing under cannon fire. Panic seized a few, who pleaded with the guards to let them flee or surrender. Mothers wept, clutching children, as soldiers blocked the exit, swords drawn. One desperate man was restrained as he tried to climb the gate, begging for mercy. A priest intervened, calming the crowd with a psalm and a promise of divine protection. The soldiers held firm, but the sense of despair was real. Every breach in the wall cracked open fresh terror. Yet when the dust settled, the city did not break. Long after midnight, Emperor Constantine XI stood alone on the palace balcony. Below him, Constantinople's flickering lanterns seemed fragile against the vast darkness beyond. In his hands, he held a worn icon of the Virgin, lips moving in silent prayer. He thought of his mother, his childhood in these same streets, and the thousands now depending on his every decision. The weight of history pressed upon his shoulders. He was the last Roman emperor. Tears fell, unnoticed, as he vowed to fight on for his people and his city. When he finally turned away, dawn's faint promise colored the horizon, and hope, battered but unbroken, lingered in the silent halls behind him. The first rays of sunlight brought a terrifying drumbeat. The Ottomans were on the move. Their artillery had battered the land walls all night, leaving new breaches gaping wide. On the plains, Mehmed II rode his black stallion before his men, shouting promises of glory. Janissaries and Azaps surged forward in disciplined ranks, ladders and grappling hooks at the ready. The ground trembled as the first wave charged the shattered walls. From above, Giustiniani and his defenders hurled stones, arrows, and boiling oil, but the onslaught was relentless. Clouds of dust and smoke rose as the Ottomans pressed in. The city's fate would be decided in the next few hours, and every man on the wall knew it. The great cannons roared again, sending massive stones crashing into the weakened wall. Entire sections buckled, raining debris onto both attackers and defenders. Dust and screams filled the air. Janissaries were the first to reach the gaps, climbing over rubble and fallen beams, pressing deeper into the city's outer defenses. Constantine XI, sword in hand, rushed to reinforce the breach with his dwindling reserves. Desperate hand-to-hand combat erupted. Swords clanged, shields splintered, and bodies fell. The defenders fought like cornered lions, refusing to yield a single stone, but the Ottomans kept coming, their discipline and numbers overwhelming. The battered gate of St. Romanus, once a symbol of the city's might, groaned under repeated cannon fire. A final thunderous blast sent its ancient timbers flying. Dust blinded the defenders as Ottoman soldiers poured through the opening. Inside, soldiers and civilians scrambled to block the path with wagons and debris. Women and children fled down side streets, while priests led prayers in the chaos. Giustiniani, wounded but undeterred, rallied his men to form a shield wall before the gate. Arrows flew, swords flashed, and the fight devolved into a desperate, frenzied struggle for every inch of ground. The battle spilled into the city's narrow streets. Ottoman soldiers fanned out, facing fierce resistance at every corner. Housewives hurled tiles and boiling water from rooftops. Children ran messages through alleys, and old men with ancient swords joined the fight. Byzantine archers shot from upper windows, their arrows finding targets among the invaders. The city's defenders made every street a barricade, every home a fortress. But the Ottomans' discipline and superior numbers slowly pushed them back. Fires broke out as oil lamps were knocked over, casting a hellish glow on the cobbled streets. The sound of battle drowned out the city's familiar bells. Constantinople was fighting for its life. The Ottomans pressed toward the Blachernay Palace, the last royal stronghold. Constantine XI and his guard made a desperate final stand at the gates, fighting with sword and shield, refusing to retreat. Inside, the empress and court women prayed as palace servants carried valuables to secret hiding places. The palace's once grand halls echoed with the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded. When the Ottomans finally broke through, a handful of defenders remained. Constantine, bloodied but proud, ordered the women to safety and prepared to make his last stand. The Ottoman banner soon flew over the palace, a symbol of centuries ending in a single morning. During the fiercest fighting at the main breach, Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese commander, suffered a grave wound to his chest. The sight of their leader's collapse sent panic through the defenders. Some believed all hope was lost. Blood pouring from his side, Giustiniani was carried from the wall by his loyal men, still shouting orders through gritted teeth. Constantine XI rushed to his side, urging him to hold on. With their commander gone, morale among the defenders crumbled, and the Ottomans sensed victory was near. The breach widened further as the exhausted Byzantines struggled to hold the line. With the city collapsing, Constantine XI donned his finest armor, the purple cloak of his office billowing in the smoke. Refusing to flee, he gathered the last of his loyal guards and knights for a final stand near the St. Romanus Gate. Swords flashed in the dawn light, banners shredded by arrow fire. Constantine fought in the front rank, calling his men to follow. One by one, the emperor's companions fell, wounded and surrounded. Constantine is said to have torn off his imperial insignia, declaring, "The city is lost, but I will not leave it." He vanished in the press, a martyr for his people, his fate sealed with the citizens. Once the last barrier was broken, the Ottomans swept through Constantinople. Soldiers rampaged through streets and squares, banners unfurling from towers and domes. The sound of steel, screams, and breaking doors echoed from every quarter. Some citizens tried to hide in cellars and churches. Others resisted or begged for mercy. Fires broke out as looters sought plunder. The city's once grand mosaics and marbles were smeared with blood and soot. Hagia Sophia's doors were battered down as crowds sought sanctuary inside. Constantinople, queen of cities, was lost, its fate sealed by dawn. Inside Hagia Sophia, thousands crowded in terror, praying for a miracle. Priests led frantic hymns. Mothers pressed children to their chests, and the patriarch raised the Eucharist, as if to shield the congregation from harm. The marble floor trembled with the sound of Ottoman axes at the doors. When the doors finally splintered, chaos erupted. Soldiers rushed in, some seeking plunder, others awestruck by the grandeur. The prayers turned to screams, but the patriarch stood firm, refusing to abandon his flock. The conquerors poured in, and centuries of faith and hope were trampled in the dust. As the sun climbed higher, silence slowly fell over the smoking ruins of Constantinople. Ottoman banners fluttered from every tower. Survivors, bloodied, stunned, and grieving, wandered in search of loved ones. Corses lined the squares and doorways. Sultan Mehmed II entered the city at the head of his army, riding through broken gates to the applause of his men. He rode to Hagia Sophia, dismounted, and entered the great cathedral, pausing in silent triumph. At last, he gave thanks for victory and ordered the city spared from further destruction. For the people, it was the end of their world. For Mehmed, it was the dawn of a new empire. The Roman Empire, after more than 1,000 years, was no more. With dawn breaking and the walls shattered, Emperor Constantine XI made his way to the imperial gate, the city's last stronghold. The battered defenders, a patchwork of Byzantine soldiers, Genoese, Venetians, and even armed townspeople, gathered around him. The emperor, his armor dented and stained, addressed the exhausted crowd with a steady voice. "Brothers, this is our home, our history, and our faith. Let us show the world the courage of Byzantium." His words brought a final surge of resolve. Giustiniani, despite his wounds, insisted on joining the defense. As banners were raised for the last time and priests offered blessings, the defenders prepared for a final desperate resistance. The city's fate, and perhaps the world's, would be decided here. The defenders scrambled to reinforce the final barriers. Wagons, crates, broken masonry, and furniture were dragged into position. Blacksmiths hammered nails and spikes, tailors tore up banners for makeshift bandages, and townsfolk poured boiling oil into pots. Women joined men on the barricades, handing out water and food, passing arrows, or sharpening swords. Children ran messages between command posts, faces set with resolve far beyond their years. The clangor of last-minute preparations echoed through the ruins. All the while, the distant thunder of Ottoman drums and war cries pressed closer, shaking the barricades and hearts alike. Before the attack began, Constantine XI slipped into a small chapel behind the barricades. The emperor knelt before a worn icon, the only light, a single flickering candle. Alone, he prayed not for victory, but for the souls of his people and the courage to meet his fate. His whispered words trembled as he asked forgiveness for the city's sins, then rose, crossing himself 3 times. "At last, As he donned his helmet, his face was transformed, not just a ruler, but a man of faith, ready for martyrdom. He returned to the barricades with a calm resolve that inspired all who saw him. At the barricade, Constantine XI and his closest officers gathered for one last oath. Swords were drawn, hands placed upon them in a circle. Giustiniani, Trevisano, and a handful of other commanders swore to defend the city to their last breath. The emperor looked each man in the eye, gratitude and sorrow blending in his gaze. "We have lived as Romans, let us die as Romans," he declared. The oath completed, each man embraced his comrades. There was no illusion. Few expected to survive the morning. Still, courage outweighed despair as the defenders readied themselves for the enemy's final push. Outside the barricades, the Ottomans readied for the decisive strike. Sultan Mehmed II, on a magnificent black horse, addressed his janissaries and azaps with fiery rhetoric. "Victory and riches await. Today you carve your names in history." He promised rewards to the bravest and mercy to those who accepted his rule. Cannons rumbled, and war drums thundered across the plain. Officers gave last instructions, engineers made final checks on scaling ladders, and banners snapped in the wind. The air vibrated with anticipation and bloodlust as Mehmed signaled the attack. The Ottoman tide prepared to wash over the city's last defenders. The final assault began with a thunderous cannonade. followed by waves of janissaries advancing behind wooden shields. The defenders unleashed arrows, boiling oil, and stones, but the Ottomans kept coming. The barricade shook under the impact. Constantine XI fought at the front, his sword flashing, rallying his men. Giustiniani, pale from blood loss, swung his sword beside him. Women and children carried water to the fighters, patched wounds, and even threw stones. As the barricade finally splintered, Ottoman soldiers surged through. A savage melee erupted. No quarter was asked or given. Inch by inch, the defenders fell back, still fighting for every step. As the defense collapsed, Constantine XI was last seen at the thick of the melee, surrounded by enemies, but accounts differ. Some say he was cut down, others that he threw aside his regalia and vanished among the fallen. His purple cloak was found stained and trampled, his body never definitively identified. Word spread, the emperor is dead! But many refused to believe it. The legend began instantly, that the last Roman emperor had fallen with his city, sword in hand, and that someday he would return. For those who survived, his courage became the city's final light. With the emperor gone and the barricades breached, panic seized the remaining defenders and civilians. Some tried to escape through hidden passages. Others raced to the harbors, hoping to find boats. In the chaos, mothers lost children, brothers lost each other. Venetian and Genoese sailors fought to save their own, rowing overloaded boats through Ottoman fire. Smoke blanketed the city as new fires spread. Priests carried relics and icons towards secret hiding places. The streets became rivers of terror, confusion, and loss, a city dissolving before its conqueror's eyes. As the Ottomans swept through the city, the doors of Hagia Sophia were barred by priests and thousands of terrified citizens. The patriarch led a final mass, his voice breaking as he offered communion. Acolytes rang the church's great bell, some said for the last time, its echo rolling across the city. Outside, Ottoman soldiers hammered at the doors. Inside, faith and fear mingled. Many believed the end of days had come. When the doors finally burst open, the conquerors poured in, awestruck by the cathedral's splendor. The patriarch stood defiantly before the altar, refusing to abandon his flock. By sunset, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. Constantinople, once the queen of cities, now lay broken and burning. Ottoman banners hung from every tower. Survivors wandered the streets, searching for family, or sat stunned among the ruins. In the palace, Mehmed II took possession. His victory complete, the conqueror wept at the altar of Hagia Sophia, moved by the magnitude of his triumph and the city's beauty. The Byzantines, who survived, mourned not just the dead, but an entire world now lost. While in that silence, history turned. An empire ended, and a new era began. The fall of the barricades opened the city's heart to chaos. Ottoman soldiers surged through the streets, seizing gold, jewels, and whatever they could carry. Doors were smashed, homes ransacked, and ancient icons torn from walls. Shouts, screams, and the clatter of boots echoed between burning buildings. Some soldiers sought loot, others searched for women and children to take as slaves. Panic swept through the population, families hid in cellars, while the brave tried to defend their homes with kitchen knives and old swords. In every quarter, Constantinople's great wealth and spirit were trampled in the rush of conquest. The proud city that had endured 1,000 years was being stripped bare in a matter of hours. In churches, monasteries, and alleyways, the weakest were the first to suffer. Priests and monks tried to shelter women and children, but many were cut down or dragged into captivity. The old and sick were slain without mercy. The mosaics of saints and emperors looked down from shattered walls on scenes of horror. Outside, screams and prayers mingled with the roar of flames. Some Ottoman soldiers, horrified by the carnage, tried to restrain their comrades, but in the wild first hours of victory, there was little order. The blood of innocents ran through the city's stones, and for many, this was the darkest moment in the city's long history. With the city in chaos, fire became the conqueror's ally. Dozens of blazes, started by cannon fire or looters' lanterns, spread unchecked through the tangled lanes. Smoke blotted out the sun as flames devoured homes, libraries, and ancient markets. Families, unable to escape the heat, risked death on the streets or leapt from windows. The city's famed marbled forums and colonnades cracked in the heat. Only the thick stone of Hagia Sophia and a few palaces held the flames at bay. Above it all, columns of smoke rose high, visible for miles. The funeral pyres of an empire. The last pockets of organized resistance were swiftly crushed. Those Byzantine soldiers who survived the breaches surrendered, were killed, or taken prisoner. Some tried to escape disguised as peasants. Others fought to the last, refusing to yield. Giustiniani, grievously wounded, was carried away by his loyal Genoese, managing to reach a waiting ship in the harbor. For most defenders, capture meant slavery or execution. The city's last warriors were paraded before Ottoman commanders. Their battered armor and haunted eyes told the story of a lost world. The city's conquerors showed no mercy to those who resisted. There was no more room for heroism, only survival. All through the city, the conquerors rounded up survivors for slavery. Men, women, and children were chained together in the squares. Merchants were separated from their families. Nobles stood stunned beside beggars, all equal in defeat. Ottoman soldiers herded the captives, some with rough jokes, others with lashes. The air was filled with sobs, curses, and pleas for mercy. Slave traders set up quickly, sorting their new property. Those judged valuable, craftsmen, doctors, scribes, were marked for the Sultan's court. The rest awaited an uncertain, brutal fate, their eyes fixed on the black smoke curling above the city. At midday, Sultan Mehmed II entered the fallen city on horseback, flanked by his most trusted commanders. The conqueror rode through ruined streets, crowds of chained captives and defeated defenders lining his path. Ottoman banners waved from towers and minarets. Mehmed's face was calm, even somber, as he surveyed the destruction. He ordered his guards to prevent further violence and called for the great Hagia Sophia to be spared for his new mosque. His army cheered, but the Sultan was reflective, already thinking of his empire's future. The people of Constantinople bowed their heads as Mehmed claimed the city, their fate now in his hands. One of Mehmed's first acts was to claim Hagia Sophia as a mosque. The doors were opened, and the Sultan entered with his imams. The great cathedral was filled with weeping Christians, but Mehmed ordered his men to show restraint. He ascended the pulpit, declared the building a mosque, and ordered the call to prayer. Islamic banners were raised, crosses covered, and the mosaics of Christ and the saints veiled. Some Christians stayed, kneeling in stunned silence. Others slipped away in tears. The echo of the Mezzan's voice marked a new era. One empire's end, another's beginning. News of Constantinople's fall spread rapidly across Europe and the Orthodox world. In Rome, the Pope wept at the altar, calling for prayers and new crusades. In Moscow and Venice, bells tolled for the lost city. In monasteries from Greece to the British Isles, monks copied news of the city's end into their chronicles. Across Christendom, shock gave way to grief, then to fear. If Constantinople could fall, was anywhere safe? In distant lands, exiles and merchants wept for lost family, their prayers rising with the smoke still visible on the eastern horizon. In the aftermath, the missing and the dead were mourned by those who survived. Families searched through rubble, hoping to find a loved one alive. Some discovered only ruined icons or treasured keepsakes, clutching them to their hearts as they wept. Priests led small groups in prayers for the dead, marking graves with crosses or stones. Among the chaos, a few reunited with family, But for most, the losses were too great to bear. The city's silence was now filled with the echoes of grief, a requiem for the dead of Byzantium. As the sun set over the Bosphorus, the last rays shone on a city forever changed. The Byzantine banners lay trampled in the dust, their eagles torn down. Hagia Sophia stood transformed, its great dome silhouetted against the evening sky, now echoing with the call to prayer. Survivors gathered on the hills above the city, looking back at the ruins of their world. Some whispered stories of Constantine XI, vowing never to forget. Others resolved to keep their faith and culture alive, even in exile. As darkness fell, a new age began. Byzantium was gone, but its spirit would linger in memory and legend for centuries to come. In the shattered streets, silence fell after the fires burned out. The survivors, old men, mothers, children, emerged from hiding to mourn the dead and search for what was left. Bodies lined the alleys and courtyards, covered hastily with cloaks or broken boards. Priests moved from group to group, offering prayers and final blessings. In the public squares, women wept openly, wailing for sons and husbands lost. Many clutched bits of cloth, a child's shoe, a chipped icon, any token that had survived. The city that once echoed with music and bells was now filled only with the sound of mourning. Even the conquerors seemed subdued as they moved among the ruins, collecting the dead. For the people of Constantinople, grief became a language. Everyone. Days after the conquest, Sultan Mehmed II issued his first decree as ruler of Constantinople. He declared the city his new capital, inviting artisans, merchants, and scholars from across his empire to repopulate and rebuild it. Mehmed promised religious tolerance for Christians and Jews who remained, but many were skeptical, scarred by the brutality of the sack. He also ordered the restoration of Hagia Sophia as a mosque and announced plans for new markets and baths. The Sultan's viziers read his proclamations in public squares, flanked by Janissary guards. Some locals listened with suspicion, others with cautious hope, but most felt only exhaustion, unsure if Mehmed's promises could heal such deep wounds. The days that followed the fall were filled with desperate searches for lost loved ones. Survivors combed the wreckage, calling names into ruined houses and alleyways. Some clung to the hope that a child or spouse had escaped into hiding or been taken alive. Others found only heartbreak, unclaimed bodies, destroyed homes, or signs of hurried burial. Lists of the missing were scratched onto walls of churches and wells. Priests and nuns tried to help, recording names and comforting the grieving. At sunset, groups gathered in the squares, sharing news and stories, clinging to hope that slowly faded with each passing day. The new rulers quickly divided Constantinople among Ottoman officials and favored soldiers. Grand mansions and merchant homes were seized and given to Turkish officers. Churches were repurposed or closed. Some districts were set aside for new Greek, Armenian, and Jewish communities brought in to rebuild the population. The city's old families, now dispossessed, crowded into small quarters or fled to exile. Neighborhoods that had once mingled Greeks, Latins, and others now became marked by sharp boundaries and suspicions. Old friends met in the markets, but the easy trust of the past was gone. A city once united by faith and tradition was now stitched together by uncertainty. Amidst the ruins, life tried to resume. A market square reopened, this time patrolled by Ottoman soldiers and Turkish merchants selling foreign wares. Survivors brought what little they had, silver spoons, scraps of cloth, old coins, to barter for bread and oil. Greek and Armenian women traded in hushed voices, careful not to attract unwanted attention. A few children tried to sell rescued books or icons. Turkish traders eyed the Byzantine artifacts with curiosity, while Janissaries watched for trouble. Despite the sorrow, the market became a gathering place for whispered stories and news, a fragile sign that some spirit of Constantinople still lived. As weeks passed, the old citizens gathered to remember lost Constantinople. In hidden corners, elders recounted stories of festivals in the hippodrome, royal processions, and the sounds of church bells. Children listened wide-eyed, struggling to imagine a city of golden domes and laughter. Old icons and family heirlooms were shared and revered. Some sang the city's ancient hymns, others wept at the memory of friends and family gone. The oral tradition became a lifeline, binding the shattered community together. These stories, passed down in whispered words, ensured that the memory of Byzantium would survive long after its stones were lost. For many, the only hope was to leave the city behind. Caravans of exiles, nobles, merchants, monks, and artisans made their way along dusty roads toward Greece, Italy, and beyond. They carried little but clothes, a few books, and the weight of grief. Some looked back at the city's walls, now adorned with foreign banners, before disappearing into the countryside. Along the way, they joined with other refugees, sharing bread and sorrow, speaking softly of the home they'd lost. Many swore to preserve their language, faith, and stories, planting the seeds of Byzantine culture far from its birthplace. While survivors mourned and exiles departed, the city's new Ottoman masters established their rule. Turkish officials and families moved into seized homes. Minarets were built alongside church spires. Markets and baths began to open under new management. The call to prayer echoed across the city, blending with the last tolls of church bells. Some old Byzantine artisans found work repairing buildings or teaching their crafts. Others struggled to adapt, torn between resentment and the will to survive. A new, unfamiliar order spread through the city. Life continued, but for many, it felt like waking in a dream where nothing was quite as it was before. Despite Ottoman rule, the city's Christians clung to their faith. At night, in hidden chapels and dark cellars, priests and the faithful gathered for secret liturgies. Candles flickered on old icons as prayers were whispered in Greek and Latin. Those attending risked harsh penalties, but the rituals offered solace and connection to their past. In one gathering, an elderly priest led a group of families in a quiet hymn. For a moment, the weight of sorrow lifted, replaced by the old certainty that God had not abandoned them, and that Byzantium lived on in their hearts. Months after the conquest, the scars of loss remained, but so did small signs of renewal. Gardens began to grow among the ruins. Children played cautiously in the streets, and the first new marriages and baptisms were celebrated in secret. Survivors wove tales of heroism and miracles, holding on to the belief that the spirit of Constantinople could not be killed. On feast days, candles flickered in windows as families remembered those who were gone and prayed for peace. Some whispered that one day the city might rise again. Amid sorrow, hope endured, a fragile seed in the ashes, waiting for a better day. As months passed, tales of Emperor Constantine XI's final stand became legend throughout the shattered empire. Survivors and refugees retold the story in village squares and churchyards, how the last emperor fought in the thick of battle, refusing to flee, vanishing into the struggle, and how his purple cloak was found trampled at the breach. Some said he escaped death, spirited away by angels, to return when his city needed him. Most, in distant lands, the legend grew with each retelling, transforming Constantine from a mortal king into a symbol of lost glory and unbroken courage. Even as the Ottomans rebuilt, the story of the emperor became a flame that could not be snuffed out. Rumors swirled about the fate of Constantine XI's body. Some whispered it had been buried in secret by loyal Greeks, the sting. Others, that it lay unmarked beneath the city's ruins. In the quiet hours of the night, a handful of mourners visited a secluded spot outside the old walls, lighting candles and laying flowers in silent tribute. They prayed for the emperor's soul, asking God to remember his sacrifice. No inscription marked the site, only the presence of grieving hearts. Whether he rested there or not, the spot became a place of pilgrimage, a silent bond between the living and the lost. For exiles in distant lands, Italy, Greece, the Black Sea, the memory of their emperor offered solace and identity. In refugee communities, churches displayed icons of Constantine XI, painted as a martyr saint. Each year on the anniversary of the city's fall, priests led processions, chanting prayers for his soul and the lost homeland. Children learned the emperor's name before they could read or write. Kes and Byzantine banners hung in secret from church rafters. Constantine's story united scattered people, forging a sense of purpose and resilience in the face of exile and uncertainty. In the generations after the city's fall, poets and artists across Europe and the Orthodox world created works celebrating Constantine XI. Painters depicted the last battle, Constantine at the breach, sword aloft, surrounded by enemies. Balladeers and choirs performed sorrowful hymns, telling of his sacrifice and the loss of the Queen of Cities. Monasteries illuminated manuscripts with images of the emperor crowned in glory or lifted to heaven by angels. These works, copied and shared, kept Byzantium's last hours alive in the world's imagination. The fall became not just a tragedy, but an epic to inspire courage and faith. Even among the Ottomans, the legacy of Constantine XI commanded respect. Sultan Mehmed II ordered that the emperor's memory be honored as a brave foe. Ottoman poets recorded the valor of Byzantium's last defenders, and some soldiers who had fought at the walls recounted the emperor's courage with admiration. In the years that followed, Mehmed invited Greek scholars to his court, eager to learn from the conquered people and preserve the knowledge of the ancient world. A begrudging respect grew between the city's new rulers and its old inhabitants, a recognition that, in the fires of battle, greatness had been revealed on both sides. The fall of Constantinople scattered Greek scholars across Europe, sparking a cultural awakening. In Florence, Rome, and Paris, these exiles taught ancient Greek, shared texts, and opened the libraries of the East to the West. Renaissance thinkers marveled at the wisdom preserved by Byzantium, from philosophy to science to art. Constantine XI's sacrifice was remembered as the final defense of civilization, a loss that fueled the rebirth of learning and culture. The emperor's legend lived on in the minds of scholars, who credited him for preserving the treasures of the ancient world. Even as his city was lost. Back in the city, Greek Christians dreamed of the emperor's return. Secret societies formed, vowing to keep the faith and prepare for the day when Byzantium would rise again. Every year, on the anniversary of the fall, candles flickered in hidden chapels as prayers for Constantine's soul, and the city's deliverance rose into the night. Some said they saw the emperor in dreams, still in armor, standing watch at the city gates, waiting for the moment to reclaim his throne. Waiting for the moment to reclaim his throne. In the hearts of many, hope never truly died. As centuries passed, the spirit of Byzantium endured in art, language, and liturgy. In villages across Greece and beyond, old songs and prayers were sung, icons venerated, and Byzantine customs observed at feasts and funerals. Even as empires changed and generations passed, families told their children of the Queen of Cities and her last emperor. The double-headed eagle appeared in embroidery and church banners, a silent declaration that Byzantium lived on in the hearts of its people. The legend of Constantine XI gave hope to every soul who believed that faith, beauty, and memory could outlast even the mightiest walls. Under Ottoman rule, Constantinople, now Istanbul, became the heart of a new empire. Markets bustled, mosques rose, and scholars gathered from across 3 continents. The city's streets echoed with new languages, foods, and music. Yet beneath the surface, the memory of Byzantium lingered. Old stones and hidden chapels, fragments of mosaics and coins, reminded all of what had come before. Mehmed II's vision made the city great again, but even he knew its greatness was built atop layers of vanished worlds. Roman, Greek, and Christian, the legacy of Constantine XI and his city was woven into the city's very soul. In every corner of the old empire, from lonely island monasteries to crowded city streets, the story of Constantine XI refused to die. His bravery inspired rebels, poets, and dreamers for centuries. Some painted his image on church walls, others wrote verses longing for the city's return. Even when times were darkest, people lit candles for the last emperor, believing his spirit watched over them, a silent guardian of lost glory and hope yet to come. Thus, through memory and myth, through song and prayer, the legacy of the last emperor outlived the fall of his city and the passing of empires. The sun sets on Constantinople, its walls scarred, its people scattered, but its spirit enduring. Though the banners have changed and centuries have passed, legends of courage and loss echo through every stone and story. The last emperor's sacrifice lives on in memory, inspiring generations to honor what was lost and dream of what might rise again. In prayers, songs, and the silent flicker of candles, the heart of Byzantium beats still. As the city enters a new age, glory. As the city enters a new age, we remember, glory may fade, but hope and remembrance are eternal, lighting the darkness for all who come after.